right, 7:06 and you're live.
Thank you, Carrie. Today is Thursday, November 5th. It is 7:05 p.m. This is a special meeting of the City of Oneonta Common Council for the purpose of discussion regarding the 2021 city budget. The meeting is hereby called to order, and I will call the roll. Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Here.
Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Rafter. Councilmember Drenick.
Here.
Okay. Okay. We will, just as a way of introduction, before I turn it over to Ginny and Joe, when we ended the last meeting, we said that there was the following directions. That this meeting, council members should come prepared to this meeting, having reviewed the materials that were provided since the last meeting. Ginny had presented a budget which required $1.3 million approximately to come from our unreserved general fund in order to be balanced. Her recommendation was that the no more than $1 million be taken out of the unrestricted general fund. And council members were asked to review particularly equipment, personnel matters, and all other matters, and come to this meeting prepared to make their suggestions, recommendations on ways we can reduce the $1.3 million to come out of reserves to the $1 million, which is Ginny's recommendation as the maximum. The second item, which we will discuss, was everyone was asked to take a look at the water and sewer fund budget and to come to an agreement upon a rate increase, as well as how much money they agree to take out of the fund balance in order to balance the budget. And then the third issue was a review of the 5-year capital plan, capital improvement plan, and any requests for changes to that plan. So those are the three things on the agenda for tonight. We'll start with the first. I trust everybody has taken the time to review what was sent, has looked for ways to their preferred ways of reducing the budget so that we only have to take $1 million, now $1.3 million out of reserves. So with that, I will turn it over first to Ginny and Joe to see if they have any further comments before calling upon people to hear their recommendations. Start with Ginny.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, everyone. As you know, Joe had just sent out prior to the meeting a comparison of water and sewer rates for surrounding municipalities, and we just wanted to provide it once we got it into the conversation tonight. And we have been looking at the budget, trying to find other ways to cut expenses. I will tell you that outside of the tax levy increase, I am not comfortable increasing any other revenue estimates at this time. I really do not know what COVID is going to do for the first 6 months of 2021. I've gone over the numbers repeatedly, looking at the estimates. I know I decreased our sales tax quite drastically and also our ambulance revenues, but I'm going to tell you, I just do not feel comfortable adjusting any of those. Also, the decreases that I did in The smaller revenue accounts, again, I studied them and I'm just not comfortable adjusting. So I would like us to focus on expenditures. If you do want to discuss any type of revenue increases, I'm more than willing to, and I can explain to you why my justification of why I hit the number that I did. But outside of that, I'm looking for your input. We can circle back to me, and I'll turn it over to Joe in case he has any words. But as of right now, I'm just waiting to receive feedback from you to see what as a council you're looking for.
Okay.
Joe, do you have anything?
Joe, do you have anything to add, Joe?
Nope. Just, as far as the water rate comparison that Jenny referenced, again, we were just trying to get it finalized, but we're still trying to get a couple updated numbers. So as when I provided it, I think I mentioned a couple of them are still 2019 amounts, but I think it still might be a little helpful for now. And, probably before the next meeting, we'll have that all updated and provide you with more current numbers on that. But I think it still might be helpful, hopefully, for tonight. And other than that, no, I think we're just looking forward to some, feedback, discussion, questions, whatever may happen.
Okay. So before we go forward, I just want to thank both Ginny and Joe. I know they have worked extremely hard. They've put in an uncountable number of hours to get to this point, and just want to thank you both for that. So with that, let's try and stay focused on the first thing on the agenda is suggested ways to reduce expenditures to buy $300,000 so we can get down to the goal of no more than $1 million to be taken from the unrestricted general fund. Councilmember Murphy has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would just like to two things. I have a suggestion, but also a comment. In regards to Ginny, what you said about discomfort in COVID, I am totally on board and totally agree. Especially as we're seeing the numbers, it's getting high again. That was my one comment, and also kind of to start the conversation off, I really looked through the budget, and with my start of recommendations are kind of things that aren't guaranteed at this moment to folks. So one of the things that I had on the not the chopping block, but that we might consider letting go is the car for the potential city administrator. In my view, we don't have we don't know who that person is, and we haven't offered anything yet. So I mean, I don't necessarily see the need for that, and it's a potential expense I think we could probably save on.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Luke, just so you know, that car has already been deferred for reconsideration for July 1st, so it will not be included in the adopted budget.
Okay.
Okay. Just for the record, Councilmember Rafter is present. Councilmember Drenick.
So even though I know it's deferred until the middle part of 2021, yeah, I definitely concur with Luke that's $40,000 one way or the other that we probably can live without. I also, one of the things that jumped off the page to me was that OPT is planning on $20,000 for forward-facing GPS tracking for the buses. And so many may know that we did that for OPT. The company has since sold that contract to Peter Clark Student Rentals, and they have an arrangement with the Student Association that excludes any cost to the city or OPT. It's a service that's being provided. So why we would want to provide a service that is already a service being provided that isn't costing the city any money and everybody seems to be pretty happy with, I don't understand. Go
Mark,
ahead.
how old are those GPS units?
They are brand new. They're constantly being updated.
Okay, Mark, this comes as a recommendation from Oneonta Public Transit and the Student Association. We will get the rationale for it to you. But this request was made by both the Student Association and the Oneonta Public Transit.
Okay,
But I don't know the rationale, but we'll get that to you.
right. Whatever the
Also,
rationale is, though, I would say that it's $20,000 that I wouldn't think we would need to be putting into this budget.
Mark, can you point to me where you're seeing that in the general fund? Because I think you're discussing the OPT fund. You're muted, Mark.
It was in the Fleet and Equipment Master Plan for 2021?
Oh, yes, and just so you know, for the GPS tracking, that would be a state grant if we were going to incur that expense. That is something that we would be applying to DOT for. But that would not affect the OPT budget or the general fund budget.
Okay. So just as a reminder, what we're right now, our task is to identify $300,000 from what was proposed in reduction in spendings to the general fund. Anybody else? Okay. Yes, Councilmember Harrington.
I got kind of just a question here. Jenny, when you said you deferred, like, I think the ambulance was deferred until July. Can you just refer that? I just want to make sure I understand it right. That's when it deferred until July, is they're not in the budget, but if we get going and the sales tax goes up and we're starting to bring in money, then those are objects that or items that we can look at later on spending money, correct? Do I have
Yes.
that right?
Yes, what we'll be doing is anything that we have chosen to defer for reconsideration for July 1st, all that detail is going to be actually within the adopted budget schedule, but it's not going to be within the adopted budget numbers, because we don't want to lose track of them, and we want to make sure everybody that we're still accounting for them. But depending on how the first 6 months of 2021 goes, as far as sales tax and ambulance revenue, our state aid, things like that, when we get better estimates of what our revenues are going to do, we can bring things back to the council for reconsideration. Do you still want to utilize the $1 million fund balance? Or if our sales tax is up by 500,000, would you rather take that 500,000 and spend it on something that got deferred? So that will be a choice that the council members will reconsider in July.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood
Yeah.
that it wasn't really in the budget. They were already done.
Right. It's not,
Okay.
they will not be in the adopted budget figures, but they'll just be reconsidered as of July 1st and also accounted for, so we don't lose track of them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, good. It was a good question, Scott. We're passing a budget with the understanding that it's an unexpected year, and we'll leave the door open for middle of the year, adding things to the budget if the money is there to do so. Anybody else with a suggested reduction? Councilmember Murphy.
I did, but I want to ask a question about it first.
Sure.
Ginny, would you mind, or Joe, or anyone, talking a little bit more about? It looked like there could potentially be a $20,000 saving with Destination Oneonta. If we go this route, is this? I guess before I ask any more questions, would you mind talking a little bit more about that?
Sure. Joe, I'll take it because I've got the budget right here in front of me.
Okay.
If you look at the DO's budget that was distributed to the council members, I think it was on September 11th, you will see that for 2020, they're going to realize a surplus of over $23,000. And so what I'm suggesting you consider is that reducing the Destination Oneonta's request from 70,000 to 50,000 to utilize 20,000 of that surplus.
Well, in my opinion, if they still get the 70,000 for next year, I don't see why we don't do that, unless anybody has any other thoughts.
Ginny, have you spoken with DO and confirmed that they do not plan on spending that money this year?
I have not spoken with them, but I have studied the budget and I do not see where they're utilizing the surplus. Their profit and loss statement that they showed, or their budget that they showed, ended as of the end of September, and that was the surplus that they had at that time. I
Okay,
can call tomorrow and confirm with them, but that would be my suggestion, that we reduce our contribution to them so we can utilize that surplus.
Okay, and you'll confirm that with them.
I will
Good.
confirm that, yes.
Thank you.
And if it's, forgive me if it's not as simple as that, but I mean, just the way I see it is if they have the money they can transfer to next year, if I'm not sure if that works with their flow chart, but if it does and they still have the 70,000 anyway, it seems like a place that we can help balance the budget a little bit.
Okay. Anybody else? Councilmember Davies.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about the status of the downtown cameras. We see that's in the budget for $120,000. I kind of remember that the chief mentioned that it's in pretty rough shape. Just want to understand that a little bit more, if anyone can speak to that.
Well, just so you know, Mark, I've recommended that we fund that purchase through the Public Safety Reserve. So that will not be coming out of the unrestricted fund balance.
Okay, my apologies, Jenny. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. As I'm not seeing any hands up, let's go back to, oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Lepari-Shu.
Thanks. I put it up late. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this like a personal budget, because that's what I have the most experience in. And business budgets that are significantly smaller. But for me, I don't know, I feel like my perception is that we're sort of looking for a couple of big things that we can wait on. And I'm just wondering, and I'd like to propose to the council, if it wouldn't be much easier to look at some of the smaller things to see if, because they're going to have a much lower impact on the quality of service and the way that departments are operating. If we couldn't, pare back some of the things that, maybe could wait another year. I think nobody wants to wait on anything, honestly. And it's the same in a personal budget, right? Like, I want that right now. I'm going to want it eventually. I might as well put it in the budget. But I definitely see, a lot of in the line items, a lot of things that are, maybe $2,000 and $6,000. I mean, ultimately, I think those would be the things that if we went, and looked at those, that they would kind of cause the least heartache. But those things add up. So, I mean, even just looking at, and again, I'm not in City Hall every day, so I may be off on some of these things in terms of the impact that they have on the folks who work in the building. But when we think about, even stripping and waxing the basement floors for $1,000, I think if we were to start looking at the smaller things, they add up pretty quickly. So I don't know if there's any interest in that among my fellow council members. It's probably a lot of questions and maybe a little bit more tedious than finding like, oh, we definitely don't need this, police cruiser. But it might be an easier, less painful way to come up with $292,000 that we need to cut from the budget. The other thing is, and this is more about revenue generation. I was wondering if, and I apologize if this has been talked about before, or if folks know more about this than I do, but if we could just talk about the pilots that the city receives currently, and what the potential is for pilots in the future, that would be very helpful for me. I know that that's one thing that has been tossed around a lot, and just some more information and understanding around that would be very helpful at some point during the meeting, if that's possible.
I'll just briefly address that, Katie, in that and Ginny may want to add on top of what I say, for the most part, we don't have any control over the pilots. They're not set by the city. Some businesses have pilots that are established by the IDA. They have the authority to establish pilots without the city's approval. They usually do check with us. Other pilots are, some are voluntary. For example, some of our not-for-profit organizations that don't have to pay taxes do a voluntary pilot just because they feel it's the right thing to do. But the council actually doesn't establish pilots, and we have very little control over it.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess some of them can be negotiated, right? Like you could negotiate a voluntary pilot, even though we can't mandate it. We can have that conversation, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can ask. I mean, there's not much to negotiate because we have no leverage, but we can certainly call every church and in the city and ask them if they would pay a pilot. We could certainly call the colleges and ask them if they would pay a pilot. We can call the hospital and ask them if they would pay a pilot. Yes.
I mean, I think that when I think about the services that we provide to, for example, the colleges, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think that it may not be pressure, but it is a little bit of at least moral leverage when it comes to them potentially offering a pilot to the city. I think we have a little bit of a better hand this year, considering all the tax that SUNY put on our county's Department of Health. Yeah, I think it's worth considering. And so I guess I don't understand currently. I think if we were to speak about the schools specifically, but I mean, just in general, what are the pilots we receive? How much from whom? And are we able to ask and negotiate any additional tax exempt organizations to be able to support the city during this time when we are facing such a deficit? And so, yeah, so maybe Ginny or Joe could speak to that a little bit.
Katie, yes, we do have pilot agreements. And as the mayor explained, they're not usually negotiated by us. They're negotiated between the county and the IDA and the business that is coming in. Those pilots are usually associated not only with the city, but with the school district and the county. So quite often the pilots will encounter all of the municipalities. And those are termed until they get onto the tax roll. So that it could be a 20-year agreement, a 10-year agreement, depending on how it was structured when the business came in. As far as soliciting other pilots, I would want to confer with Dave Merzig. There are rules and regulations of what the city is able to do as far as soliciting donations, which that is basically what we would be asking them to do. And so we would need to be very careful in our approach and make sure that it met the legal requirements. And I believe that the COVID effect and having the college students not in our area has already been demonstrated to the council of how much the colleges bring revenues into our areas, not only for our general fund, but our water and our sewer and our OPT fund. So I would just like to stress that when I went over the possible losses from the college students not being here, how much it affects our local economy. But we can explore those different ideas. We can explore, we won't be able to do it in time for this particular budget, but I will send a report to every council member and the mayor describing what pilot agreements we currently have and with what companies they are with.
That would be helpful. And I think just to be clear, I know that the students do a ton for our local economy. They also do a lot for SUNY, and I think that there are things that we could be mutually beneficial if we were to have the right conversations. So I'm happy to open that conversation. I appreciate your information on that.
Sure, I'll make sure to get that to you.
Councilmember Carson?
Thank you, Gary. Greg, am I understanding this equipment list correctly that the Kubota excavator is still in here for 105,000?
That's correct.
You want to replace an excavator that's only 5 years old?
It was purchased used, so it's, I think it's six, maybe it's 5 years old. But the idea is the excavator will be getting a little bit smaller and a little bit more versatile, and it's what we can use it for. I think we'll get more use out of it, and you know, the trade-in value of the current excavator will cut into that 100. Was it 120,000, 125,000? So we'll only be paying probably 50,000 or less, I believe, in the end.
Well, it's down for 105,000, Greg.
105. I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong line. Yeah.
And so is this an opportunity for us to utilize shared services with other municipalities around us? That for those occasional times that we need maybe a little bit smaller excavator, we could utilize theirs instead of spending the 105?
I think oftentimes we're with our shared services agreements, it's our excavator that's being lent elsewhere. I suppose we could look into that and see if there's someone out there that doesn't get a lot of use. But with the operations, we often have two things going on at once, and that can be a problem with scheduling. I think this is something where we gain some efficiency, but it's something we can explore.
All right. So for 2021, is this a piece of equipment that we could just maybe, on the occasion that we need it, we could just rent one from like Beisler or someone nearby that has that type of equipment, rather than expending out 105?
Right. Our expense would be 40,000 based on the $65,000 trade-in value. That's based on one particular quote based on a state contract. So we could look into that. Obviously, depending on how much we use it, that could approach a similar cost. Maybe not. It wouldn't be 40,000. I can imagine we could cut that down for 2021.
To how much?
To how much I can't say at this point, but
Right.
I don't think it would be a $40,000 rental for the amount we would use it. We'd have to just pay more attention to scheduling.
I mean, we have the ability to go and get it. We have the low boy. We can load it up on it, right? It's not we have to rent that. We're going to rent the equipment for a week, whatever the project lasts.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with our projects that we're using these for, they're not necessarily a full week project. There are days here and there, and we're moving around a lot. I'm not saying that it's not a good idea. It's something we can look into. The reason we kept this in the 2021 budget as opposed to recommending it be held or pushed off is that, I think that it has the most potential for improved efficiency in the department by doing this, as opposed to the street sweeper, for example. That will help our efficiency, but it is replacing in time. This is actually going to create some more flexibility in our operations, which I think would be beneficial. But we can look and see what other options are if that's something that you'd like us to do.
Right. I mean, it's like the shop air compressor. I get it. It's 21 years old. We should get something new. But with a 5-year-old machine, because it's maybe a little bit bigger than what we want to use occasionally, I don't know, for me this year, that's a lot of money.
Could I just make one clarification on this particular item? Len, just so you know, for this excavator, in the general fund budget, it's $13,334. We're splitting it in thirds between the general water and sewer. So our actual cash outlay is only going to be about $40,000 because we're going to get about a $65,000 trade-in value.
I understand, but thank you for the clarification of the new number, because the number that we were provided says 105,000.
That's the total cost of it. But if you look under sources of revenue, it will say 65,000 under other sources.
Jenny, thanks for explaining that. I was as Len was speaking, I was trying to look for that cost and I wasn't able to find it. Greg, are you saying by purchasing this or having our own, it's going to give you more flexibility then in engineering to possibly even get multiple jobs done?
Yeah, and in public works, so we have 2 excavators now. We have
Right.
a larger one that we used to use more often. We used to do some different projects, bigger projects, full street reconstructions in-house. And we've kind of moved away from that a little bit, or are focusing more on some smaller tasks that split our crews up more often. And so to send one, we have to constantly, it's a juggling act and scheduling, trying to fit in a water valve replacement with a catch basin replacement. We can't do 2 on the same day efficiently with the equipment we have. That the 160, the bigger excavator, is just a little too big for a lot of smaller streets and tight areas.
My fear is that if we go to where we have to rent an excavator, we're going to severely limit what we're able to accomplish during the warm weather. And if we don't, our costs could potentially go through the roof with how much we have to rent the equipment for various jobs. I mean, it's a balancing act, obviously. But I would lean toward keeping it in there based on what Ginny was saying, but that's just my opinion.
I actually had my Zoom panel over there where those revenue costs were, so I couldn't see them before. I guess I would like to see how many times, Greg, you guys are using this. I understand a day here or there, but we're trying to avoid employee costs. We're trying to avoid having employee contributions for insurance go up. We're trying to avoid furloughs. We're trying to take care of the city staff. So if it's something that we can, a piece of equipment that we can maybe look at in 21 or 22, 23, it would help.
Okay. So you'd like to see a report from this year, maybe that number of hours used. We use the N excavator just about every day. I know it is, like I said, it's a juggling act. We've in the water and sewer department, we've been contracting out a lot of jobs recently for both the equipment and the labor. When it's something that it's kind of two-pronged. If we had the right equipment, the right flexibility in that sense, and also as we develop our staff to have more qualified operators, that's something we're working on in conjunction. Then that would allow us to do more of these smaller jobs in-house, not have to hire a contractor.
Okay.
Councilmember Davies.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So this is a question here, and Greg, this is probably aimed at you. With the building, the recreation building roof replacement, $30,000, we still have that in that kind of pre-July 1 window. Is there any argument for pushing that off, or is that in such a deteriorated condition that it really is an immediate cost and we couldn't push that off till later in the summer, best case scenario?
Yeah, we kept that in there. We've had a contractor look at that a couple times. And the last time we had a contractor up on the roof was not last year, probably 2 years ago, but they gave it 1 to 3 years before we might expect to see some leaks. Obviously, that's a subjective opinion. But it's not leaking now. We could always hold off, and obviously if it starts to leak, then we need to repair it and look to replace it sooner than later. But it's one of those things we could hold off on it, and then I could bite us, but it's not leaking at this moment, so it's not an emergency.
And Mark, forgive me for interrupting. You're referring to the roof repair in the Newell Park building?
Yeah, is that another one that's not in the general fund? I thought that was.
It is in the general fund, but I have suggested that it get funded from the repair reserve. So it's not coming out of the unrestricted fund balance.
Okay. I keep targeting the wrong places, but thanks, Jenny.
You're welcome. It's a good eye though, Mark.
Okay, as it seems like the well of ideas may be running dry. I want to remind everybody that we had given Ginny and Joe the task of presenting what they felt, their draft budget, what they were recommending to us, and that's what they did. So being that we're not hearing, we have a potential savings of 60,000 from the from possibly DO contract and possibly from the excavator. That still leaves at least $250,000 or thereabouts. So what I wanted to do, and I'll get right to you, Luke. What I want to do, but first I'll let Luke speak, is that to go back to Ginny and Joe and ask them with their expertise and knowledge of what they would propose to the council as ways that they would think would be effective in reducing the expenditures by that $250,000 or so. But first, let me let Luke speak.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I hesitate to say, because I was hoping maybe for some extra savings, but looking at the tax levy, we have the opportunity to raise that 1 to 2%, correct, Ginny?
Right now, what is in the tax levy proposal is a 2% increase, which raises 95,000, but we are able to go up to a little over 200,000, which would, if you went the full way, it would be over a 4.5% tax levy increase.
I would love to hear what Ginny has to say for other potential savings.
Okay, as the mayor said, Joe and I, we've gone over this budget and over this budget, and this is what we want to propose for tonight. We're proposing we have a $50,000 in there right now to upgrade the payroll system. I would like to defer that to July 1st and reconsider it. This will be postponing making our payroll system more efficient, and things like that as far as decreasing staff time. But because of the financial situation we're in, I would like to suggest that we defer that till July 1st. I would also like to consider reducing the Destination Oneonta from 70 to 20. And just so you know, I did get an email from Destination Oneonta. I will be talking with them tomorrow. You will see that there's $20,000 in the budget for trip hazard with sidewalk repairs. I've spoken with Greg about that. We would like to defer that till July 1st and reconsider that. They just finished the trip hazard work for this year, this month. So that is something that we think we could postpone for a while. There's $50,000 in there for sidewalk repairs. I would like to suggest that we fund that through the street and sidewalk reserve. And if you approve what we've already presented to be using for the reserves, adding this $50,000 would only be using about 8% of the reserves, and we had originally discussed about using 10% for the 2021 budget. The next thing I would like to do, these are a couple small items, but there's travel expense in there for the New York State Planning Federation conferences. I do not know how important these are for 2021. I tried to reach out to some people to find out some answers, wasn't successful. But I'd like to consider deferring those as we've done other travel expenses for other departments, and wondering if maybe we could do them remotely or virtually, or just by websites, going to the websites themselves and getting the information. That is about $6,400. We're going to defer some furniture requests, which is about $5,000. We are able to decrease the retirees' health insurance by about $20,000 for an estimate that we no longer need. Then I would like to, I was a little hesitant to do this, but I think that I can work with Charlie for the vehicle maintenance codes. I'm going to go through each department on the vehicle maintenance and find about $44,000 and reduce each department's just by a little bit, so each department is not hurt too badly. And then the last item that I would like to recommend is that we defer billing or reducing the city manager / administrator budget and taking out 1/2 year of that expenditure, and that's about $76,800. When you take all of the items that I just listed, that will bring the deficit down to $1 million.
Discussion, anyone, pro, con, any of those items? Councilmember Carson?
Jenny, I thank you for all the hard work that you and Joe have been putting into this.
Oh, it's our job. Thank you. It's what we do.
I'm just a little hesitant on the central garage, the $44,000, because, you know, I think we just approved the maintenance costs, and you were going to sit down and work with Charlie on that. Have you done that? So you feel comfortable that you could reduce his budget by $44,000?
Well, what I did for 2021 is I increased that particular budget by 34,000. I have not had time to meet with Charlie yet, but I am thinking that if I spread it out over the departments, and if maybe some of the major work has been done and we won't have to incur it again, how we base the budget is on a 3-year average. So I just need to meet with Charlie and say, let me take $2,000 here, let me take $4,000 here, and then just see if I can get it up to the 44,000. I think I can, but again, it will be a reconsideration. It's not something that I want to forget about. So I may be coming back to you on July 1st and say, look, the maintenance budget just didn't work out. But
Right, so
because,
if that happens, then we're going to be pulling the money out of the contingency.
well, the contingency I've already reduced by 50,000. As you know, our policy is to at least have 1% of our budget. So the contingency is going to be very carefully monitored. I'm not going to be offering that money up very easily. One reason being is one thing that is not in this budget is the completion of the street light project and our debt payment to NYPA. The reason it's not in the budget is because I have no figures to work with right now. So I would like to hold on to that contingency to be able to fund that debt payment if indeed it starts in 2021. So this is going to be a very tight year, and everybody is going to have to think essential and do we really need this? And if we can postpone it, we're going to have to postpone it. So that's why with the vehicle maintenance, I think there are enough departments within the general fund that I can find that 44,000. But again, I will confer with Charlie on it.
Yeah, I would feel better if we could get Charlie's input first before we
Okay.
say yes to this. Given the fact that we just wrote, I think, once, and we're going to do it again before the end of the year to increase the budget item.
I understand your concern, and vehicle maintenance is always it's always an educated guess because we never know what's going to actually come up. We never know how many accidents there's going to be, so it is an educated guess.
Councilmember Murphy?
Thank you. Ginny, since you have recommended, and this might be a way to kind of find the middle road between what Len is saying and what's being suggested, since we're potentially putting off hiring a city manager until July 1st, would it be possible to, I know we discussed this a little bit earlier, I'm just trying to think. I know the car is part of the package, but it is an additional 40K.
No, I'm sorry, Luke. Let me just interrupt for a moment.
Sure.
The number that I just gave you on the 76,000, that's just salary and fringe benefits.
Okay. Okay.
I think you said the car was already removed, correct?
Yes.
Jeanette?
That's right.
correct.
I'm sorry, Jenny. I lost track.
Yep.
Apologies.
Anybody else? Any objections to any of the items on Ginny's list there? Ginny, thank you for, for doing that work. It's not easy, I know.
You're welcome. And thank you to the department heads.
Yeah, I mean, it's a time for everybody is chipping in by sacrificing, no doubt. I'm not hearing any objections to things on that list, Jenny. So, oh wait, Councilmember Murphy.
Mayor, if this is improper, let me know. May I propose a question to the council regarding the budget?
Of course.
In specificity, I'd be interested to hear how fellow council members feel about the July 1st pushback for city administrator. If anybody has any thoughts on that.
Risberger?
Yeah, I'm not completely sold on it. I mean, I'm not totally against it, but I know that we've all said in recent weeks how we wanted to push forward with that hire and start the process. And I'm not keen on just abandoning it for 9 months. I mean, it's a long time. I mean, it wouldn't be abandonment for 9 months, but possibly for 6 months. I mean, if everybody else is okay with that, I'll go along, but it just makes me a little bit leery.
Janik?
Yeah, no, I it's frustrating. It's rock and hard place stuff. But I tend to concur that we're on this path to hire a city administrator, and it may take a very long time before we finally settle on somebody. And I'm concerned, or it may not, but I'm concerned about going off on the shoulder and sitting here for a while and having we may be in a place right now with everyone dealing with, the pandemic, where we may be able to attract somebody who wouldn't typically be considering Oneonta, or we may not. There are so many variables that my sense of it is that continuing the process and making a determination about date, that determination of date will be kind of informed by the success of the process.
If I could just direct the conversation a bit. Every item on Ginny's list, there's an argument for not cutting. So the focus should be really on how to make up that money by cutting something else or increasing taxes. I mean, because that's really what it comes down to. So for everything that's proposed not to cut on Ginny's list, there should be, something that explains where the money is going to come from to pay for it, which is either cutting something else or raising taxes higher than 2%. Lepari Shu?
So again, I have a lot to learn here, so I could be way off base. But I think you're right, Mayor. We need to start looking at for me, I loved hearing things like the payroll system. It's a hard decision, but it isn't something that is critical to the operation of the city, or I suppose, hearing from our city staff that it isn't critical to the operation of the city at this point. It does feel like the kind of thing that when you put it up against having to raise taxes or lay off city staff or something like that, it does feel like something we can wait on. So I have been trying to scour the line items. For me, it feels like, the waiting on the city manager, I think to Mark's point, it may happen that we end up that late in the year, but I don't think that we should delay the process for that long. So when I'm looking at things, and I'm just going to ask a couple of questions about how critical you think some of these things are, because that's only $76,000 that we need to make up. So I have here in Fund A, 1622.464. Is that right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. We have item 8 and item 12, paint the gym walls for $8,000. Okay, I see, maybe that's gone to zero. Is that, so we were gonna do that and now that's gone? Is that what that means?
Yep, that was one of the deferrals.
Okay, and the new entrance doors, is that something that we need to do urgently?
I believe so. I think, Greg, you can speak on to it better than myself, but I believe it's almost a safety issue now.
Yeah, I would highly recommend keeping that in there.
Okay, I was wondering if it was something like that. Okay, I'll keep scouring. Thank you.
Can I just make one point, Mayor? As we were going through this budget many times, we were basically saying, what can we do so we don't cut services and we don't cut staff? That was our goal when we were reading the lines. So targeting the city manager's position for July 1st was a staff member that we don't currently have. So I just wanted to tell you what our logic of thinking was when we were looking at it.
Davies?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny, for the explanation, and thanks for this list. I guess I was going to ask you if there were any items that as you were working through and thinking about areas that you wanted to target, was there anything that could be added to this list, and the possibility of that the city administrator position being removed from it? Was there anything that was just off of this list that could possibly be added?
To me, I'm going to say no to that. I've gone back to the department heads more than once to say reconsider. Basically, if you look at their detailed list, they have cut what they think they can safely put off. And they will be, I want to say, making do until they've got the funds to be able to purchase those things. So I did not find anything else out of, outside of travel. We even cut travel as much as we could, saying we don't have to go this year. The only travel that's in the budget, hopefully, are for when people need to keep their certifications and or their licenses or their training up to the level that we need them to perform their duties. So outside of that, and also we may have potential savings if we don't get all of the police officer positions filled by January 1st. Those are potential savings. But I do not want to present a budget to you, so then we have to double it up when it comes to 2022, for that many positions in the police department. It wouldn't be fair to you or the council or the taxpayer to say, this is what we're going to do for this year, but we're going to have to double it up next year. I know that is a little counter to what I'm suggesting to do on the city manager's position, but because that money is so big, I would rather do it gradually, absorb the 76,000 this year, and then absorb more in 2022.
Harrington?
Oh, just another question. We're looking at 2% tax increase right now with the way the budget is in front of us, with bringing down everything that you asked, correct? That
Correct.
you cut just tonight. I guess, wouldn't it be a question of the council, is 2% really where we want to be? Because if we want to go lower, then this job's going to get a lot harder here real quick. And maybe we should say, where do we want to be? Is 2% comfortable, knowing that we have, seen some businesses around us really lay people off, and a lot of businesses really struggling to even just keep their doors open. And we have taxpayers that are struggling to meet their bills and stuff like that. So I guess my question is should we look and see is 2% really where we want to be, or do we think we need to go lower? And if we want to go lower, how much, and then how are we going to get there?
I think that's a good point, Scott, at this time to take a look at, and not to do it in a vacuum, because particularly for businesses, the water and sewer increase, it's all ties in together. Drenick?
Yeah, so I'm wondering if we've given up on looking for any revenue enhancements. We continue to look at, the taxes of 2% or less than 2% or more than 2%, but taking that off the board, and the water and sewer, we're already talking about, the increase that we are, or that we will. In talking to some of my constituents, one of the things that has been brought up more than a few times by more than a few people is the idea that there are communities that charge a surtax to students when they bring a vehicle into the community of $50. And it's a tax, but it's not a tax on our local population. And it may be a tax that would be palatable and bring in an additional level of revenue that isn't something that is going to cause pain to people who are already going to see some level of pain.
I would ask how we can constitutionally charge some members of the population for something that other members of the population do not get charged. Why can I bring a car into this community without being taxed?
Yeah,
but
and again, it was.
Student can.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mayor. I haven't done the research on this. It's something that a number of my constituents and my wandering around and speaking with people have brought to my attention. It's their contention that this is something that may be done in other communities. And if that's the case, then there's a precedent for that. I don't know that that's the case anecdotally. It's been presented as being the case. There'd be research that would need to be done. But if it is in fact the case, then that's a population that might well be able to absorb a $50 charge for, for the benefit of using our streets and parking their vehicles and what have you, and impacting, the infrastructure of the city.
We can do, a quick call to David, I'd bet almost everything I have that would not be constitutional or something that we could do. But a quick call to David, could confirm that. Scott Harrington?
My hand wasn't really up, I'm sorry. But Jenny, I know just a couple things, I guess, since he called on me. I know you brought this up before about parking enforcement and possibly bringing back some parking fees and stuff like that. Have we really looked into that, or is that just, we talked about it and we just kind of let it be for a little bit?
Well, I'm going to let Greg answer this in more detail, but from what I understand, there is a current study or plan being investigated by looking at a bigger vision, which would incorporate paid parking. And I don't know, Greg, if you want to share that plan at this time, or maybe it's not ready to be shared, but that is something that is being looked at. It will not be instituted for the 2021 budget, but that is being explored.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. Certainly no updates at this time on that, other than that it is something we've started talking about. Our first focus is looking at the snow emergency parking, as has been discussed at some committee meetings. But that all plays into parking in general. So we want to look at the whole thing, possibly paid parking, possibly changing our parking regulations here and there, how it affects street sweeping, how it affects snow and ice control and all that. But as Jenny said, it will take some time to really come up with a well thought out plan.
Okay. The second thing, Jenny, for you is, how much does it cost for the city just to keep the doors open and pay our personnel for a year? Like, is it $10 million out of a $14 million budget? Is it, just to do the basic services to try to keep things running?
I want to say, normally the payroll and fringe benefit cost is close to 70% of our budget. And with the current budget that we are proposing, I don't have the update, but I'm going to say, because we've cut so many other items out, I'm going to say it's probably closer to 75%, maybe even up to 80%. But I will get those numbers to you, Scott, once we incorporate all the changes that we decide upon tonight. I'll get that information to you. But it's not just the payroll and fringe benefit costs that they need. They also need the tools to provide the services. So there is the vehicle fuel, there is the insurances to cover every member of the staff and the elected officials and our buildings and our flood insurance and our fire insurance. You know, there's the utilities for the heat and the light, all of those type of things. That's going to exist if we have 1 employee or 400 employees.
Right, and that's what I'm asking is how much is it for all of that combined for to keep our doors open, all that stuff combined. That's why I was asking, is it 10 out of $12 million? Is it 10 out of 14? Is it, or are we at, well, you know, to keep just the doors open, we are at, you know, 11 out of a $12 million budget. So there's really not a lot of places to go.
Well, I feel that there's not a lot of places to go right now because we have cut so much out of this budget, and the department heads right now are really cooperating very well as far as doing the absolute minimum to get by. Okay. So I think that's where we are now. There may be some items in there that, you know, say for example, we had our full police staff and we didn't need new training because they weren't going to go to the academy. Right now, the 2021 budget has training for those officers that are going to be filling vacancies to go to the academy. So maybe the next year, if we ever get up to full staff, that won't be in the budget. So, you know, so it's not an easy question to answer because every year is unique depending on, you know, what we've got in front of us.
Thank you.
Joe, I'm sorry, I've been doing all the talking. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, not at this time. I mean, I think you're covering everything well. If I really had something, I'd chip in.
Okay.
Carson?
Ginny, on that list that you were just sharing with us, reducing the budget expenditures by 292,000.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to give us that list so that we can, I'm looking at page 3 of the PowerPoint slide presentation that you and Joe did last time.
Okay.
I was just looking at, you know, you have personnel services, fringe benefits, equipment, supplies and services, debt services, and transfers. I mean, those are the items, the line items that you pulled
Right.
out of.
Yeah, and all of these items outside of the deferring the manager, all of the other items would be under contracted services or supplies.
Supplies and services.
Supplies and services, yep.
Okay, so you're basically adding 220,000 more of a reduction, $220,000 more of a reduction to the already 256,000.
Len, let me correct myself. The $50,000 on the payroll upgrade, that would have come out of equipment because
Right.
that's a capital investment.
And Ginny, sorry, some of those amounts are also going to be coming out of fringe benefits. So personal services and fringe benefits. I don't know if you specified that.
Right. Thank you. But I can update that for you, Len. If that's where we go with, I update all of the reports.
Jumping back for a minute to Scott's question. Are we inclined to try to set a target for tax increase now or wait and see where that comes out in the end? The current, again, just a reminder, the current budget that was presented shows a 2% tax increase. We can do 0%, we can do 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. Again, Murphy?
My thoughts, I really don't want to raise the tax levy. However, it has been brought up, we've got to find that money elsewhere. It could be somebody's job that could potentially get cut. You know, it's been said before, these are the best options of a bad situation. And I think we should probably do our best to keep that in mind. I really don't want to raise the tax levy, but I'm really not seeing a lot of other places we can go without starting to cut jobs.
Let me just say that if we adopt everything that Ginny had listed in her recommendation, we're there without increasing taxes any more than 2%. So there are no additional cuts needed if we adopt everything on Ginny's list. Drenick?
Yeah, I would definitely want to keep the tax rate increase to 2%, no higher than that, and that goes to what you're saying, what Ginny's already provided. I also want to save you the headache of or the time of calling Dave Mertzig about my suggestion. I've done the research. There's no such animal as that.
And just so you know,
How much was that bet again, Mont?
just so you know, Mark, and also for the rest of the members, we will be searching for other type of revenue sources. They've talked about a public service fee, a public safety fee, you know, different things like that. We'll research all of those. We will bring them to the council's attention once we have educated, informed information. But we do not have the time to do that for the adoption of this budget.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we have to focus on anything, any new fees is a long-term project to implement, and it's not going to happen for 2021. Also, just so you know, all of the ideas about public service fees and curb fees, and none of these are new, and they've been discussed for years. Most of the discussions that we've had around them have brought them to a dead end for one reason or another, why they could not be implemented. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying.
And I agree with you, Mayor. And as I said to you, and I believe, you know, I'm talking to the choir here, but the best way to raise revenues in our city is to have economic growth, bringing in new jobs, bringing in new residents. Then the economy will follow. And, you know, so if we're able to develop the rail yards, if we're able to develop the Dietz on Loft and the different housing projects that we've talked about, those all have chain reactions.
And, you know, just for an example, forgetting the future economic development aspect, but if Lofts on Dietz Street gets built, you have probably, you know, $100,000 right away off the bat increase in tax revenue. You have renting of parking spaces and to the tune of $70,000 a year in the parking garage. You have water and sewer income, which I don't know how much that would be, but it'd be significant. So, I mean, you know, right, you've got several $100,000 just from one project in revenue directly to the city, let alone increased sales tax, increased business activity, and so on and so on. Growth is what we need.
That's right. And I just want to back up on one item on the, we had talked about on the paid parking. Part of the study also, we're going to be analyzing when we did have paid parking in the city versus increasing our parking fines. Greg and I were talking about being proactive with people, which is much better received than penalizing them because they have a parking violation. So we want to look at raising parking revenues from a different angle.
Len, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I agree. There's been several ideas that have been tossed around for new revenue streams for the general fund. But I like Ginny's idea of looking at the paid parking. There's new apps out there. It's not like we have to buy a infrastructure to put that into place. And you know, maybe through the planning committee, we can discuss moving forward on that in 2021. But under the revenue, for me, I was kind of zoned in on the water fund for raising revenue, and I didn't know when you guys were ready to talk about that.
As soon as we're done, here, I mean, we need to leave this at a point where we know what the next steps are. I mean, Ginny has made a proposal of her recommendations. Council is free to make adjustments to that. But again, for everything that's taken away from that, it's got to be somehow compensated for.
Right, to that point, I raised the $44,000 for vehicle maintenance, and Jenny's going to get with the department head, Charlie, and speak with him and make sure that that's something feasible. Other than that, I mean, if you're asking for a poll, top of my head, in my memory, I was good with everything, but I just have a concern about the maintenance costs.
Okay.
I think I am too, Ginny.
So, Ginny, do you want to make those changes in the budget? And then, I mean, I know that the draft budget is supposed to be presented, is it in 2 weeks from now?
Well, next week, the 12th.
Next week, okay.
Yes.
So maybe you can make those changes and mail them out to everybody to review, and, people can, if they have comments on it, new ideas, can send those in for, for consideration.
It is time for us to start putting together the full budget packet. So we're going to hopefully get to you a packet that's almost going to look like the adopted budget. So it is going to be bulky. There will be a lot of information in there, but what Joe and I will do is we'll take these changes, incorporate it, and almost get the final adopted budget together for your consideration. It will include all of the debt schedules, all of the salary schedules, and things like that. And then that budget will be laid on the 24th, no, the 17th for voting to accept and to schedule the public hearing, or to vote to make changes to it, whatever you end up doing.
Gary, I think we're also going to get back, or Greg was going to get back with us about do you really need to spend the $40,000 or $45,000 for the excavator? If that's something that they could wait until 22.
Mayor, you're muted.
Yeah, you're right, Len. We have that and the 20,000 potential DO savings, and Ginny's going to explore both of those and see whether they can be, how they fit in.
And I believe Mark Davies, even though it wasn't under the general fund, he brought up the roof repair. So that's another potential $30,000 savings.
That was included in reserves, right, Jenny?
Yes, that's coming from the repair reserve.
So that's not a fund balance item. It could still be taken out. It would just reduce reserves. It wouldn't reduce the difference in the fund balance.
I will reach out to the parties that is necessary, and I will email all the council members and let you know what I find out. So if I'm hearing everyone's opinion correctly, we're going to settle at the 2% for the draft budget, for the tentative budget. That's how I'll move forward. Okay, I'm seeing noddings. Okay.
Yeah, my opinion's reserved until we talk about the water and sewer before. Because if we're starting to talk about increases there plus here,
Okay, good segue, Scott. let's go to the Water and Sewer Fund.
Okay, as you know, we have presented you with some schedules to consider. We showed you a 5% increase in the rate tables for both the water and the sewer funds, with the minimums going up $10, and also a 10% increase in just the water fund rate tables. I will tell you that I'm recommending that we do a 10% increase in the water fund. The water fund just is not funded well enough to provide the services that we provide to the community. And I understand the concerns, but I just want to let you know that is my recommendation. As the Waterworth presentation showed you, we need to raise the rates gradually over the next number of years to actually get the water fund to where it is self-supporting, and where we'll be able to repair the infrastructure needs that we have, and for us to also reduce our future debt within the water fund, which will save the taxpayers a lot of money. So in that consideration, I will take your questions. Joe, I don't know if you want to touch base on the report that you provided to the council members as far as comparing them to surrounding areas.
Yeah, I think that came up at the last meeting, and we just wanted to try and provide some of that information. As I said, when I sent it out, a couple of the municipalities that are being compared were still 2019 rates, so we'll try and get that updated and get it revised now to you. But it still provides some information, because if anything, those rates likely stayed the same or increased. And the municipalities that we compared to were the same ones that we did last year. That's, they were chosen based on size and, proximity in a lot of ways. In terms of what is happening at other municipalities, like Norwich, for example, did not have a rate change, but they're anticipating a rate change upcoming because they have a large project going on I think that should be completed this year. So I would imagine that they're discussing, already for the 2021 budget, some changes, but it just haven't, gotten those yet. And then I think it was the city of Geneva, in 2020 had it, from 19 to 20 had a 8.5% increase, and then in water and a 5.7 in sewer. And like I said, I didn't have some of the other changes, so we can give you more information once it all comes in. But I just think that was something that came up that was that might have been helpful.
And I would also like to stress, I want to point to the information that we provided you, showing you what the average user, which is about 83% of our annual bills, they use less than 75,000 gallons a year. And for the city users, if the minimum was raised $10 for the water bill and $10 for the sewer bill, and the rate tables went up 5%, their annual bill would go up just over $34 a year, or about $2.83 per month. If you were to do the 10% on the water and the 5% on the sewer, their annual bill would go up $41, almost $42 a year, or about $3.50 per month.
Carson?
Just a quick question on the water rates 2020 monthly / quarterly customers, the page that you supplied us with. The column that says usage per step, could you explain that, please?
That means that's the number of gallons that are being charged for within that step. So 0 to 37,000 means the usage per step means that they used 37,000 gallons. How our rate table does the math is it divides it by 1,000 gallons. So that's just why it's in the rate table that way. So the next step, when you go from 37 to 75, that means you used an additional 38,000 gallons, and so on down the chart. Does that answer your question, Len?
Right. So if I used 397,000 gallons, I pay the rate for the 0 to 37, then I pay the rate for the 37 to 75.
Yes, yep.
Correct.
You go up through the table. So your cumulative rate for the 397,000 would be $949.40. If I'm looking at the same rate table you are.
So before the meeting got started, I was just talking with Joe about the math, asking him, since this is what you guys do every day, just double check my math. So basically the folks that use 0 to 37,000 gallons, they pay
$208.
Yeah, but that basically for a gallon of water, they're paying a half a cent, just over half a cent.
And it's not only just for their water, but it's also being hooked up to the system. So it's, it's having the water delivered to their house. It's not just for the water, it's for the actual operation of the plant.
I completely understand. I'm just saying that for a gallon of water, they're only paying a half a penny. So when I looked at the paperwork that Joe sent out before our meeting tonight, Cobleskill, the town of Cobleskill, they pay a penny per gallon. The town of Cooperstown pays a little over a penny per gallon of water. And then, of course, the rest of the folks would be less than that, right? So to get to a penny, you would have to be $307, right? So under the Waterworth presentation, how many years were you looking at an increase before we got to the point where our revenue exceeded our expenditures?
I want to say, Greg, to reach our goal of having a $3 million reserve, I think we were looking at 2029, if I remember correctly, Greg. It was out in that range.
Yeah.
So we were proposing, slow and steady increases and different percentages during the year to try to balance it out.
So in 2029, are we going to be paying a penny for a gallon of water?
I don't want to answer that question right now. I want that information in front of me. But one thing I want you to consider, as the mayor said, once we get growth in the community, once we get more residents, we may be able to say we don't need a 10% increase in 2025. Maybe a 5% would work because our usage has gone up. We have more customers. Say a big business comes in and we're selling them more water. It's or we have an agreement with the town of Oneonta for some reason. You never know what opportunity is going to come in front of you to change the dynamics of the current situation.
So what I also noticed though, Ginny, is that once you leave the 37,000 gallon line, you really only pay 1/100 of a penny more all the way up through the chart. And I was just questioning, how long have we had the 8 steps after the first step? And what was the reasoning for why we have so many steps to begin with?
Well, just so you know, it's funny that you asked that because I put together a history report. So let me call that up.
Well, I'm not really curious of the amount of years. It's just what was the reasoning for it? And meaning, do we need that today? Will Waterworth, their program, are they looking at a 9-step system?
They will look at whatever we need. Just so you know, Len, we used to have a lot more steps.
Oh my goodness.
There was probably 5 or 6 more steps to the current one. The reason I was going to call it up is I didn't want to misquote the year, but I want to say it was around 2011 that it got condensed to this, but don't quote me on that because I just don't have it right in front of me. And what Waterworth will do is they will give us any scenarios we want. For example, say we don't want steps. We just want a penny per gallon. And then we want a base hookup fee. We can project the revenues that way. Or say we only want 3 steps. We can put in as many models as we want.
Right. So I was just wondering why the folks that use hundreds of thousands of gallons more water than the average home, why they don't pay exponentially.
Well, they do.
Len,
Oh, go ahead, Mayor.
So what I'm trying to get at is we're looking
You
for
go,
revenue
Jim.
revenue sources within the water fund. It seems like if we adjust our rates and make it fair across the board, number one, paying a half a penny for a gallon of water is just mind-boggling to me that it's that cheap.
Well,
Len, I just want to be clear. Are you proposing equalizing so that the lowering the rates on our big users and in turn raising the rates on the average homeowner?
No, it's just the opposite. It's just the opposite.
You're
So
expanding the difference.
I'm trying to understand why the folks, the commercial industrial folks, they got to be them that are using hundreds of thousands of gallons of water every year pay 1/100th of a penny more than I do or you do. We have this massive water system, distribution system, because we have certain customers that use hundreds of thousands of gallons of water every year, and yet they only pay 1/100th of a penny more than the rest of the private residents. So I'm suggesting that we take a serious look at our revenue system for the water fund, and then obviously once we get that, if I'm right, it's water in, water out, correct? That's the way you guys think?
Mhm.
Right. So the sewer fund will be the same way.
Yeah, and Len, I want to, I will put together a report for you to show you how much revenue is being generated on each step.
Mm-hmm.
But then I want to confirm the 1/100th penny that you're mentioning, because when you're at the second step where
Mhm.
you're up to 75,000, you're paying $4.01 per 1,000 gallon.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get up to the 3 million, then it is 6.93 per 1,000 gallon. So,
So that's still 0.006901. So it's right there. Yeah.
so I will give you a report that shows you how much revenue is being generated by each step.
Mhm.
And what the original logic of how this rate table got developed way back in the beginning was to encourage conserving water. They didn't want people just running water because they only knew it cost a penny. So the goal was to reduce the amount of water used.
Right. So I'd like to give credit where credit's due. Councilmember Katie Lepar-Shu, I believe, is the one that came up with the idea that we should set up the system to do our water bills and our sewer bills quarterly so that folks can have it automatically withdrawn from their account on a quarterly basis. Are we to that point yet?
We're not to that point yet, but we are investigating it.
Is that something that we could make happen in 21?
Maybe towards the fall of 21.
Mhm.
I won't be able to do it for the first 6 months, but we could seriously look at it for late fall.
Right. So Ginny, correct me, what was the percentage you're looking at? 10% for the water and 5% for the sewer?
Correct. I would like to raise the minimum on each one by $10. So the minimum would go from $208 to $218 for the water, and the sewer would go from $230 to $240. That would be the minimum for the water and sewer.
Right, but at the end of the day, would our revenue exceed our expenditures in the 21?
Not yet, no.
Right, so where are we going to draw the fund balance out? Because if I followed the notes correctly, we're going to be down to $149,000 for
Yes,
21.
and if all goes well, I'm going to be able to make a one-time adjustment to the fund balance in the water fund for about, it's going to be over $300,000.
Mhm.
It's an accounting thing, Len. I don't want to get into the weeds of it,
Mhm.
but that will be able to make the fund balance in the water fund stronger, and in the sewer fund by about 200 to 240,000 by the end of
Right.
the year.
Right.
We
I mean,
have to, go ahead.
we don't have crazy expenses in the water fund or the sewer fund. Both
No.
department heads run a very tight budget. So for me, I'd like to see us get to the point where our revenues exceed our expenditures, that we're not always taken out of our savings account, right?
Correct.
So what is it that we have to do to get to that point?
Well, we need to raise the rates. As we showed you in the Waterworth presentation, if you want to increase the rates by 50% next year, it will get us to that point much faster. But we did not think that would be the approach you would want to do. And so that's why we suggested small, steady increases for the next, 5 to 9 years.
Right, but you're suggesting across the board, and to Gary's point, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that you keep, folks, the 83% has got to be the residentials. You keep that rate, the half a penny, the same for 21, and you raise the rates on the folks that are using hundreds of thousands of gallons of water.
I put that question to Dave Merzick, and he said that we have to have justification of why we're adjusting the rates that we are, and that we can just not pick and choose based on customer or based on usage. And also, just so you know, if you do not raise the first 2 steps by the 5%, you'll be leaving about $120,000 on the table. And
So I'm justifying it because our infrastructure is based on the fact that we supply hundreds of thousands of gallons of water to some folks, whereas we wouldn't need an infrastructure the size that we have if we didn't have them. And the fact that they only pay 1/100th of a cent more than the rest of us is just discerning.
I don't know that it's necessarily true that we wouldn't need the capacity if we weren't providing to these high capacity people. I mean, the water treatment plant, for example, was built in the 70s when there was a significant difference in high capacity users living in the city. Well, that's it.
And just so you know, Len, as I said to you before, 83% of our annual are under the 75,000. We have about, I want to say 30 accounts that we bill monthly, and maybe about a dozen accounts I'm sorry, I misquoted, about a dozen accounts that we bill monthly, and about 30 to 40 accounts that we bill quarterly. So we don't have huge amounts of users for that top step. The colleges, the hospitals, some of the restaurants, and some of the hotels, and the laundromats. And you will see that, we break out the colleges so you're well informed as far as what the college revenue is bringing in versus the non-college areas.
Where's that in this chart?
That I have not provided you as far as the number of
Oh, okay.
customers.
I'm sorry. I thought I was missing it. So
No.
well, again, Gary, if you're looking for someone to say something, I understand that we need to get between the water and sewer fund. Is bare bones. I really don't see where they could cut much more, but we need to increase our revenue for both funds. And so for me, I will agree to the 10% increase and the 5% increase for the sewer.
Anybody else on the 5 and 10%?
I move that we agree to Ginny's proposal. I don't think we have much of a choice, but I think in the end, by slowly increasing the minimums on both of those funds, it will be better off for the residents of the city in the long run.
I second Len and Dave. Third, I guess it would be.
Mark Jonick?
No, I'm just saying fourth. I'm in the same place.
Does anybody object? Again, that was, just to clarify, Jenny, it was 5% for water and 10, no, but the other way around.
The other way around,
10% for water, 5% for sewer.
correct?
Okay. Does anybody object? Scott?
We just didn't last year. They just do 5 and 5.
Yes,
I guess I object, Gary, because if we're going to do 2% in for taxes and then do 10% here and then do 5%, and even though I understand water and sewer is going just not to the taxpayer but to everybody, so you're still talking about 10, 5, 15, 17% increases to the taxpayer total. I have a big issue with that. That's a lot of money, especially what we're going into right now. And I understand that that they're both in need of money. I get that, but I think we need to look at the budget and say to our department heads and stuff, man, we're going to have to cut even more, because I think we're going to have to be about a 1 to 1.5% tax increase there, and maybe, a 5 and a 5 like last year. But I can't justify going to anybody in these times and say we're jumping everything up in the middle of what we're going through in this time. I can't do that. I can't justify that to anybody. I'm looking at my own personal income saying, how am I going to justify this coming out of my own checkbook? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for everybody, and a lot of people and businesses and stuff that are already struggling, and taxpayers that are struggling, and homeowners. And, we always say we want to bring people in. We want to bring people in. Well, when you keep jumping this up, how do you bring people in? I know we're in a catch-22. I know we're between a rock and a hard place, but maybe the hard place is going to be, we have to really think about this time, really think about what we're going to do. And I think the city's future is on this. I don't see where the future of the city is going to be if we keep going in this rate.
Scott, is there a percent increase to water and to sewer that you would support, that you propose supporting?
Well, the water is the one that Jenny keeps saying every meeting is in real trouble, correct?
correct.
And the sewer, I would go with a 5% with the water, but not raise the sewer.
I just want to, can I just add a little bit more information to that, just for your consideration? The sewer fund rates were not raised for 4 years. And as a result of that, the revenues that the city was receiving in 2014 was basically the same amount of revenues that we were receiving in 2018. So I just want to give you that information to understand that if the revenues are not being increased, but the expenditures are, then you're not presenting a balanced budget. The amount of money it costs to deliver the water to the house or to the resident or to the building, and the amount it costs to dispose safely and meet safety standards of disposing the water, it costs a certain amount of money. And it's, as you know, as we've discussed, the department heads are not, working with excess. They're working with the absolute minimum that they can. So I just want to give you that information for your consideration. And also, Len, if you want to think of dollars instead of percentages, because sometimes when people talk percentages, it's like, whoa. But as I said to you before, the doing 5 and 5 for the water and sewer is $34 per year, or about $2.83 per month. The doing 10% on the water and 5% on the sewer, it's about $42 a year, or about $3.50 per month. So I just want you to have those numbers to refer to, and so you can decide accordingly.
But to that
Jenny-
point, Jenny, but that's also saying, look, we're going to do, say it's 34 this year, say last year it was 30 some dollars, the year before. I mean, this is compounding. It's not just look at this year. You got to take what happened a couple years ago, where we're trying to go, and some people are barely getting by. We're not a rich city. The city is I feel that the city is right now in a position where we really have to be cautious because we want to bring people in, we want to bring businesses in, we want to get growth going. But at the same time, we have businesses that are struggling just to keep their doors open during this pandemic.
Mhm.
And while I understand what you're saying, this may not be the time to do the raises in these water and sewer plus the 2% tax. It might be the time to say, maybe we have to look at 2022 and just get everybody prepared. You're going to go up 10% in 2022 because we have no choice. But we tried to get you through this part of the pandemic with the bare minimum raises and that we have to do.
Jenny?
That's
Oh,
just
sorry, Scott.
no, I'm sorry, Dave. That's just kind of a broken record. I mean, if you play it backwards, it's probably like a country song, but it's really, that's really where, I'm struggling. I got people in the 6th Ward all the time that they had a hard time last year when the water sewer rates went up, when it was passed and stuff. And, they're barely getting by as it is, and they don't know how they're going to get by now. So, but that's just my opinion. Sorry, Dave.
All right, Scott, sorry I interrupted there. Ginny, am I correct that the reason, or at least part of the reason why we're in this situation right now with the water and sewer funds is because we had so many years of having no increases? Is that true?
Not in the water fund. The water fund's been consistently increased, but the sewer fund, we did have 4 years where we didn't have any increases. That's one of the reasons in the sewer fund. The water fund has been increased. Sometimes, I shouldn't say not every year. There were some years there were 0 increases, or just the minimum was increased. But I can give you reports. I put a history report together the other day that I mentioned to Len earlier, so you can see what it really is that our rates are so low as far as the sales that it's generating, as far as the revenues that it's generating compared to the expenditures.
And this has been talked about for at least the time that I've been on council. And I remember when I first came on, that was a very big discussion, and they had said that at that point there hadn't been enough of an increase in the cost, and it was difficult to justify getting assistance when we weren't charging that much.
Correct. We've actually been denied grants because they said that our water rates are too low.
Yeah.
Another part of it, I think, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we've been much more aggressive in the last 5-6 years in rebuilding our infrastructure, which is desperately needed.
Mhm.
And the city may have been lax, for a period of time and in doing so. So our water and wastewater infrastructure, we've got an $10 million project going on right now in rebuilding a wastewater treatment plant that had been neglected for 40 years. And we're doing water mains regularly. So I think that progress requires that and growth requires that, but you have to pay for it. And the only way to pay for it is through the water and sewer rates.
Correct. And along those lines, neighbors of ours just up the road are paying more than double what we are.
Also, just so you know, you'll be getting a proposal to modify the sewer code. And what I would like you to consider is allowing the finance department to get the bills out to the residents by February 15th, but still having the due date by April 30th. That way they'll have a 75-day collection period with no penalty. And we'll accept monthly payments during that time period. And also, if they ever want to prepay on their account every month, we can put that towards their next year's bill. So we are trying to make, with the tools that we currently have at our disposal, we're trying to make it easier on the resident.
Harrington?
So, Mayor, I guess my thing would be is, what would it be if we shored up and we did the water fund? And I understand what Jenny's saying about the sewer, and I know we got that project going, but what if we worried about our water fund to try to bring that up a little bit more and push the other one down to the following year?
My reaction to that, Scott, is that we've got that large debt payment that's going to be coming due when that project is completed. And if we do not have our cash flow where we need it for the time those payments start to kick in, I may be coming to you with a much larger increase request than just 5 or 10%. That's why, my recommendation is slow and steady.
Could I just say something?
Sure.
Okay, sorry. So I think there's a few things to consider. Scott, when at one point you had mentioned getting the department heads together. One important thing to remember is when we're talking about the water and sewer funds, because they're standalone funds, it's really just one department head, and that was done. So on the expenditure side, looking at, with Greg and the department head for both water and sewer, going through line by line, not just account code by account code, but request by request. Even looking at the chemicals. So we were going down to looking at, how much chemicals have been, what was the cost of chemicals for this year based on the usage? What is the projected usage for next year? So what's the ratio of the chemical cost that it might be, to try and find savings. So, I think a lot of work was done on the expenditure side in that regard. And so, if we're getting to a point where, we're getting near the kind of bare minimum, I think to use your expression from earlier, keep the doors open kind of scenario, we don't have a lot of more choices on the expenditure side. So then the Waterworth presentation for the water, I know it was just for the water side and we haven't done the sewer side yet, but I think highlights, we have a cost to deliver, to maintain, to operate our system, to have the people on staff that are qualified to do those things. And there's a cost to that. And, while it is borne by all of our taxpayers and users, I mean, obviously we deliver water outside of the city limits as well. They're still getting a benefit from all those improvements. They're getting a benefit from, all the things that we do to maintain our system. And because the system is old and because there has been, a lot of efforts made to maintain it, we have costs. So while the impact is great, I think there's also a great responsibility, looking forward. I would say, your idea of doing 10% on one and not the other, I would look back and say, in retrospect, which is easy to do, right? If a 10% water increase had been passed last year, maybe that does look different during a pandemic. But unfortunately, no one knew this was coming. And then the other thing to consider too is, I guess two more things. One is, even if you looked at a 10% increase in the water, it would still be a $10 minimum increase on the minimum usage, which is closer to a 5% increase for the majority of our users, especially when you look at the annual household users. So effectively, while you're raising rates 10% on the higher usages, you are only doing a 5% increase on people who use, at the minimum or less. So, that's almost a natural way, to address Len's question earlier about, other users, because by moving the table, right, you have an impact at the bottom, but you also have the impact on the users. And then the other thing is just usage is down this year. We expect it to be down next year. So if you maintain rates, and this applies to both water and sewer, but if you maintain rates while decreasing the amount that rate is based on, you're decreasing revenues. And so again, to try and make that up in expenditures becomes very difficult when you're already kind of where you need to be or to operate at all, I guess you could say. So I just want to try and tie some of the things together for consideration.
Yeah, I understand that, and I understand we got to look at our infrastructure, and like I said, I know we're in a catch-22, so to speak, and when I said about department heads, I didn't mean just the water and sewer. I was referring to the whole 17%. If you're going to go 10, 5, and then the 2, I was saying go back when I said department heads, I mean police, fire, DPW, all of them, and say because you'd have to lower come underneath the 2% is what I was getting at there. Sometimes my thoughts are way in front of what comes out.
Well,
But,
I think to consider that too, it's important to keep in mind the different funds. So when you look at the 2% on the tax levy, that's in the general fund, whereas the 5 and the 10% are in the sewer and water funds respectively, and they're also on different bases. So a 2% on a tax levy of millions of dollars obviously raises a lot more money overall, even though it's distributed between various users. Whereas when you look at a 5% increase on a water bill, that's going to impact every user, by that amount. So there's certainly an impact, but I think to say that, I think I understand what you're saying, but I also think it's a little misleading to say 17% because they're not additive because they're not applied to the same base, if that makes sense.
Right, but the average person's going to sit there and say, you guys just did everything at 17%.
Right.
Even when they're coming in to look at buying a house or start a business or
right. And I think in that regard,
you're not going to sit there and understand that it's 10% on for this or this. They look at the cumulative number going, and that's what they're going to look at.
Well, sure. And I think that, if you look at the comparison with the other municipalities, if you look at municipalities that are paying $500 for the combined services, versus $400 for ours, we're still at a net advantage there, even with some of the increases, So, it's true, but I think we also have some good things going in that regard. And then the last part is, we had, again, if it costs, Len was referencing a half a cent per gallon. That's what we charge. You could argue whether that's high or low, but what really matters is what it costs to deliver that gallon of water. So if it costs a penny to deliver that gallon of water and it costs a half a cent and we're only charging a half a cent for it, is that sustainable over the long term? And I think what you've seen with the lack of increases in prior years, it hasn't kept pace. And then we're kind of in the situation we're in, depleting, what is in effect our savings in the fund balance, to help make this up. And if you look at the trends that were projected in Waterworth, I think that really graphically represents it well. The different scenarios that were shown. What happens if you don't raise, if you do raise, how much you raise. So,
I understand that, and excuse me. But and I understand the importance of getting the water there, the chemicals, and have to make sure it's like a business. You got to be in the profit. You can't be in the negative. But also, right now, the way we're looking at things to be in a profit is who's paying for what, and
yeah.
when you're looking at 47% people pay for 100% of the services for our other, what we just were talking about before with our general budget. And then, but everybody's kicking in on the water and sewer. I get that too. We're not really comparing apples to apples all the time. But I'm just saying,
Sure.
it's one of those things. I want all of us to be cautious. I guess what I'm really saying is I just want all of us to be cautious going into this, knowing that next year could be just as hard as this year, if not even worse. And if
Sure.
we're going to try to be, so I kept saying, I understand we're in a catch-22, and I understand where, I'm talking about delivering versus and all that stuff, and I get that too. I'm just trying to, we need to approach everything with caution.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think the next year could be tough, but I think that also highlights the need for kind of the measured, steady approach that's, it was proposed last year. I mean, the plan that we're kind of operating under now was really what was, right, Jenny, was what was proposed last year on a multi-year kind of approach and plan. so that there's not a big increase. It's almost like if you want to buy a car, you can take a loan out and pay the loan payments, or you can save up a little bit every year until you have enough to buy the car. And that's kind of what we're looking at doing here, which I think is, something that anyone in a household can relate to.
Okay, so before we, let's just take a little reality check here. So Ginny's proposal was 10% increase in the water rate, 5% increase in the sewer rents. Could I have a show of hands of how much support there is for that? I mean, if you support it, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think that there's a majority support for it. So unless somebody who didn't raise their hand wants to make one last plea of a point that hasn't been made already, we'll probably move on. Okay. 5-year capital plan. Again, this was put out shortly before the last meeting, so everyone justifiably felt they didn't have enough time to review it. So now everybody's had a week to review it. Are there any requests for changes to it or questions that need further explanation? I'm not seeing any. Davies?
Sorry, just trying to find my notes. Yeah, I noticed that in the facilities plan, there were quite a few costs associated with the airport. There was a runway, entrance relocation. I think that was for 2021. I hadn't seen those or heard about those before, so those were the ones that kind of caught my interest in terms of they looked like they were some pretty big ticket items. It looked like we might be able to get some grant money for some of them, which is why it looked like there was a smaller portion of that coming out of the general fund. But just want to understand those a little bit more because several of those fell into our 2021 budget.
Just as a quick word of explanation about how, well, why don't I let Len? Len knows more than I do about how the grant funding works from the FAA. Do you want to explain that, Len?
Len, you're muted.
Muted, Len.
Did you want Carrie as the airport manager to explain this?
No, not the detail. I just thought to point out that the way it works with the FAA is they have formula, pretty much formula grants, and we have a 20-year plan with them where we lay out year by year improvements, and we are eligible every year for a grant towards those improvements for the long range 20-year plan of improvement of the airport.
Right.
Typically, we are responsible for 5% of each project. This past year, we have not had to pay any share to each project because it was covered by the CARES Act. I don't know what will be next year.
Right.
But typically it's 5%.
And we have a very aggressive airport committee chairman. Mr. May has been very aggressive with the FAA in getting them to pay almost everything. And they also have increased the projections of when they were going to put in the runway. Mark, to your point, the airport was built in 1965, and for the next 56 years, there was never a taxiway. So the FAA is justified that for safety reasons, we need to have a taxiway. So after myself and Mr. May went down, I think it was last year, the FAA has said, yes, we'll move the timetable up. And so that's the cost that you're seeing projected for 21. And as you can see, there's coming out of the general fund, typically there's 10% of what the project is. To Gary's point, this year, the apron was supposed to be done. That's been on hold because of COVID. And the fuel farm was also supposed to be installed. And again, that was put on hold because of COVID. But again, Mr. May has gone out and at this point, we haven't really had any costs associated with the airport this year and the FAA loan.
But you're right, Mark, there's cost going forward, but it comes down to, do we take $1 million grant and it costs us $50,000, or do we turn down the $1 million grant in order to not spend the $50,000?
Well, and do we have some type of revenue, projected revenue kind of plan and thinking, Lynn? I don't know if that's something that's been developed, but I'd be interested in seeing that.
Typically, the airport, minus the taxes, generates enough revenue to sustain itself. Between fuel and rentals, we have one part-time employee and to turn the lights on and keep the snow off the runway, to do all that. Typically, the airport generates enough revenue to sustain all those costs. Moving forward, you guys already know that we have a private entity that's interested in expanding at the airport. And so hopefully in 21 that will happen. And I think that's the beginning of more of those folks coming in and expanding the airport, which means we'll sell more. Plus you have lease rentals, lease agreements. And I can't say that all of the cost will be covered by revenue. That's for sure.
Mayor, could I just expand on that just a little bit?
Please, Jenny.
Just so you know, Mark, we do have an airport master plan that is controlled between the commissioners and our consultant. And Carrie is very much involved in that also. The master plan, we're waiting for the updated version, and then we will update the 5-year capital plan, hopefully before it gets adopted at the December meeting. So some of those airport projects that you see listed may get massaged just a little bit. And also Carrie informed me this week that for our 2021 grants, they will again be 100% federally funded and not require a city portion.
Thanks for that clarification, Jenny, and thanks, Lynn.
Any other requested changes to the 5-year capital plan or questions regarding it? Okay. Greg, looks like you must have done a hell of a job.
He did.
You say so.
Okay, that concludes what was on our agenda for tonight. Anybody want to bring up any related subjects that we haven't touched on? Luke?
If I can unmute myself, yes. I just want to, I try to do this as often as I can because just really express my thanks to everybody here and not here that's been involved with this budget. The curveballs thrown by COVID, as well as the economic downturn as a result of it. This isn't easy, and just really thank you all so much for such hard work.
Scott?
Joe and Jenny, even though sometimes I put you through the paces, I just want to say thanks. It's the amount of work that you guys do, and I wouldn't be doing my job, I don't think, sometimes if I didn't ask the hard questions. And just the way you guys handled it tonight was, nothing's easy. I understand that, and we got a lot of big decisions to make, and I just want to thank you guys for the amount of time that you've been putting in on this.
You're welcome.
Well said, Scott. Okay, we have another meeting a week from tonight, I believe, the 19th.
Uh,
No,
No,
not the 19th, the 12th.
Well,
the
12th. And at that meeting, Jenny, why don't you talk about what will take place at that meeting?
Okay, basically what will happen at the meeting is we'll take all of the changes that we put together between this meeting and following up with the different department heads. We will be giving you basically the budget that we want to adopt, or I shouldn't say adopt, but consider as a tentative for you to vote on at the second council meeting in November, which will be the 17th. And that way, and also, I just want to make it for the public record that it's, according to the charter, it should be 1 week before the meeting, but we had agreed last week that we weren't going to quite make that 1 week mark. So we'll be giving it to you on the 12th for your consideration at the 17th council meeting.
Now, Jenny, I don't have the dates in my head, but there has to be a public hearing a certain number of days before the vote, correct?
Yes, it's at least 1 week before the vote. And I believe we were looking at the 24th or 25th, somewhere in that area. I think you were going to check everybody's calendars to see when they were available. Joe, do you know if we decided upon that at the last meeting for the public hearing?
No, I don't believe so. I thought there was 2 dates that were being discussed.
Yes, so I think everybody was going to check their calendars to see when they were available for the public hearing.
What were you proposing, Jenny? What were the dates you were
The
proposing?
24th, Tuesday, the 24th. That would be 1 week after the tentative and 1 week before the adopted.
And okay, so it'd be, we would, no meeting or anything, just would call the meeting, open the public hearing,
Correct.
and then close the meeting after the public hearing.
Correct. Yeah, it's just for the public to be able to make comments on the proposed budget.
Anybody not able to do it on the evening of the 24th? Okay, looks good.
Seven
Scott,
o'clock?
did you have your hand up?
Oh, sorry.
Yes,
I just
7
got
o'clock.
I just got one question. Ginny, you said you're gonna kind of have a paper form budget for us before our next meeting, correct?
Yes,
Are we just gonna pick those up from our mailbox, or?
I can put them in the mail to you if you don't want to come into City Hall. It's however you would like them delivered.
It's however you guys feel comfortable in the city hall. I would just come in to grab it off my mailbox and leave. I wouldn't even hang
Okay.
out in there. But it's whatever you guys feel more comfortable with in the city. So you can just tell me how you rather do it. That's
Well, I'd rather save the mailing costs and just put them in your box and have you stop in to pick them up.
okay. I'm good with that.
Can we opt out of that and just look at an electronic copy?
Yes, you can.
I'd like that, please.
Okay.
Sorry, saving the paper and the cost.
Okay. All right. Very good. I think we made a lot of progress. So next meeting a week from tonight, and Jenny will have the tentative draft of the tentative budget for us for discussion. Okay. Any final requests from anyone? Okay.
I want to thank all of you very much. Thank you very much. And Joe and I will definitely have the packet ready for you by next week.
Thank you, Jenny,
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
and everyone.
Thank you.